This is a video I've been very excited to make for a long time. My dear friend who needs no introduction, but will do it anyways, of very early days Hodinkee Talking Watches fame, Mr. Phillip Toledano, has invited us into his home to finally look at his entire collection in one sitting. I've seen all of these watches, but never in one sitting.
Yeah. And you're already sick of them. You came pre-sick of them.
Pre-sick of them. Yeah. But it's great to see them all together. We're going to talk about them. I think the most important watch we're going to talk about, that's probably the most sentimental to you, is on your wrist, but we're going to save that for the end.
Okay.
But honestly, I've always respected you, not as a person.
Definitely not as a person.
Definitely not as a person.
Never respected you
but as a collector, I've never met anybody. I mean, there's a couple guys who come to mind, like Ronnie Madvani, etc., Kevin Odell, that really, truly beat to their own drum, like do not care what like popular trends are in, will not own a Royal Oak, a Nautilus. I think one time you were considering buying a Submariner, and you quickly dispensed with that idea.
I actually weirdly like the Submariner now that kind of no one likes them. That's basically how I function. If everyone likes stuff, then I won't like it. It's weird.
So Phil here has amassed a collection that is truly unique, truly him, an extension of his personality, I would say. So first of all, thank you for sitting down and taking the time to show us all of these watches. I don't even know where to start there. I tried to separate the watches into categories.
Okay.
I guess let's start with what's right in front of us because it is the most commercial brand on the table here.
Right.
We have two areas of vintage Rolex, completely different, completely out of left field, kind of areas that not a lot of people focus on, but you have, and you have for quite some time too. So I guess let's start with the, I guess you could say pre-Daytonas in front of us, and we have also a triple date chronograph, very rare one. Walk us through why you like these watches. Maybe tell us a little bit about, you know, some of them. Again, we'll see how we're doing on time to go through all of them, but I see which one's my favorite immediately.
Of the pre-Daytona?
Yes.
Which
of
one?
These four.
Which one?
You take a guess. Come on.
This one?
Yes, yes. So let's start here.
Okay.
What do we have here?
Well, let me just say a thing about pre-Daytonas. I've been obsessed with pre-Daytonas for years. To me, it's the most interesting part of Rolex. Well, actually, that's not true. The 70s stuff also. But I just love that kind of, that collision between like 1940s design aesthetic and then this kind of oyster case, for the most part, that we is vaguely I mean, it's so familiar to us. So there's this kind of collision of aesthetics happening. So that's a Tropical 3525. I bought it at auction. You know when you buy something at auction and then you immediately, oh, here comes Mr. Frumples.
Mr. Frumples.
Mr. Frumples has come to, he's a huge watch collector in his own right. Mostly Hublot. So big bangs he's very keen on. So you know when you buy a watch at auction and then you immediately shit yourself because you paid so much money and you're like, oh, I really, like I hope my bid didn't go through, or I hope they don't. Like, you kind of don't want them to email you to say like, oh, now you have to pay. That was that kind of watch. But I just really love it, and it's hard to find a Tropical 3525, and it's all like the gilt, whatever it is. It's beautiful. And then I'm such a bracelet nerd that I sort of went on this research frenzy trying to find out what were period correct steel bracelets for these watches that weren't Rolex.
Right.
So then I found this, on eBay. Yeah, exactly.
And they had a lot of period made in England bracelets that are very actually difficult to find, and most of the times when people see them on a watch, they don't understand what it is.
That's right.
I think it's correct.
Yeah.
So I've always adored the 3525 because, first of all, 35mm case, monoblock case, and it's a prisoner of war watch, so that you could, if you were a prisoner of war in the 1940s, you could order this watch from Rolex and you could pay them upon return to your country. I love the history behind it, and obviously this example, such a fan of the gilt dial era and the gilting process and how these watches look, and there's never been a watch since then, or dial making process since then, that is quite aesthetically beautiful and pleasing.
You see, you know so much more. Like I'm basically like a design prostitute.
Right.
Essentially, as they say in the horological world. So I never really I like the history, and I'm not really I never really know much about like how things are made or about the movements. I'm never really interested in that. I'm just interested in like either the history, like as you say, the POW thing, or just how it looks. Like actually, for me, my grail was the 4768.
So tell us about this one.
So I just always wanted one. I always just thought they were incredibly beautiful. I remember seeing this in the Sotheby's, I think, or Philippe's catalog.
Right.
And I was like, oh shit, I wish I could have bought it. And then during the pandemic, someone got in touch with me like, oh, do you want to buy it? And I was like, I'm not doing anything.
Right.
Of course I want to buy it. Yeah.
So steel and rose gold,
Yeah.
triple day chronograph. I get technically people refer to it in the Keeley category.
That's right.
But for me, the Keeley is the one you wore, which would be either a 6036, 6236, but falls in that category. But for me, it's weird because these don't bring the same price as like the 6036 or 6236.
You know why? It's because of the weird lugs.
Yeah, but this is so much for me a much more interesting watch and a rare watch. You know?
Well, I mean, I think they only made a couple of hundred of those. Is that right?
Very small production, yeah.
And this allegedly came from like this, the old son of the original owner. All that. I mean, who knows?
Right.
Who knows? But that was, But,
yeah, for me, the watch itself, condition looks beautiful. So provenance is great, but like at the end of the day, you're buying the watch.
That's exactly right.
Mostly.
But it came with box and papers.
Did it really?
No. It's very important, box and papers.
Right. And then we have a couple, I guess, more pedestrian 6234s.
Well, this one, I think that's a 6034.
Right.
This one is pretty common. This one is a pretty rare dial, but the condition is nuts. Like, if you look at the crystal, it's all crazed. Like the whole, look at it like that. It's just, I mean, this is so nerdy, but do you know what I mean? Like,
whenever I have a crystal like this, I refuse to change.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, the condition's nuts on this one.
Yeah, beautiful example.
And that's a pretty rare. I had bought one, the same dial, on eBay like 7 years ago for 22 grand, and then I sold it, and then I was so gutted, of course. So important to sell cheap. And then when you buy it again, try and pay double.
Yeah.
Is an important rule of thumb.
Buy high, sell low.
Yeah, exactly.
So a quick, detour. Have you sold a lot of watches because you've been collecting a while that you've then rebought again in the future because you missed them?
Actually, very few. Actually, this watch I bought again. Okay. But almost never. I mean, I get a lot of shit for sort of, I think people think I'm a flipper. And I would understand from the outside why it would seem that way. Because for me, I'm always so curious. You know when you buy a watch and then sometimes it'll arrive and you look at it and go, oh, that's not for me, immediately. And other times I'll buy it and then it'll kind of satisfy the urge to own it, but I won't want it anymore. Right. And it's not that I don't like the watch any less, it's just that I have to then funnel that money into buying something else.
Yeah, I mean, this whole hobby is a sickness in the sense that you could be, and I think a lot of it has to do with social media and how quickly everything moves these days. You could buy a watch and then the next day you see something else on an Instagram post and you're like, oh my God, I never knew that would be available. Like, I need to buy that now.
That's exactly right.
And so you're selling something quicker than you would have liked to, But that's also what makes the hobby beautiful, is that like you could get in and out of watches, unlike, I know you're a car guy, I'm a car guy. Getting in and out of cars, buying a car and then reselling it is sometimes very difficult.
It's excruciating.
It's a difficult process. Sure. With a watch, it's a lot more fluid and easy to get in and out of watches, so you could enjoy a lot of different things
there are endless pockets of interesting watches. Yeah. Like there's I'm always kind of discovering like, oh, here's a whole other thing I never knew about. And that's what I love about watches versus cars, actually. And then with watches, there's this kind of appearance, there's this idea, which is totally bullshit, that they're kind of affordable, you can buy lots of them. Right. Because then it just keeps stacking up, or they just get more expensive, or all the rest of it. But it seems like you can buy more of them.
It seems it. Yeah. So let's stick with Rolex for a second. Let's move on to another pocket of your collection, which would be, these are a model that I kid you not, when I got started in the business around a decade ago, if somebody offered me one of these watches, I would say, hey, throw it on a scale, let me know how much it weighs, and that is what I will pay. Those days are long gone. Right. We are talking, of course, about the Rolex King Midas. Phil here has, it looks like two different generations, the early asymmetrical case and then into the later symmetrical cases, all of different varieties, none of them common versions, no basic yellow gold. And I know that this gave you huge inspiration for that, which again we will talk about. We'll table that, but walk us through your Midas collection and what drew you to them.
Well, one of the things I find so interesting about watch collecting is I will look at watches for years and think they're terrible and ugly and uninteresting. And then literally, it can be like, overnight, I'll go, hang on a minute, this thing's genius. How could I not have seen how genius this was? What was wrong with it? Yeah. And that's what...
Geezer watches.
Yeah, it's weird. Like it's like a switch. And so I started... This is the first one I bought, the original asymmetrical. And I just saw it and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. How could I have not thought it was so amazing before? And then, of course, that got me down the wormhole of all the others. And I was kind of just, as always, kind of interested in the slightly more obscure ones. I mean, I really wanted the Pavé diamond one.
So when you say the original, I know you're referring to the reference, which is 9630, which is the very first one.
Yeah.
Was that the reasoning behind you going after this watch, or was it just nice, clean, white gold example? Wouldn't have mattered if it was a later generation, like 40.
No, I wanted the very first one.
Okay.
I wanted the first one in white gold, for sure.
And this one, although a later generation, I sold one of these. Like you said, I got you a link for it so you could finally wear it. For me, is one of the most interesting and cool Midases, just because of the way they designed this case.
Yeah.
Absolutely crazy watch. Certainly not for somebody who has one Midas. I think you need to have a lot.
Well, this one's interesting because the design of the watch carries through the entire watch, versus like this kind of thing where there's the bracelet design and then there's the head and they're separate ideas in a way. That really got me thinking about this watch that we ended up designing. That idea of continuing the idea all the way through.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. It's a very eloquent way of putting it too. You know, I never thought about it that way.
But it's really interesting because when you think about the watch that way, it opens up a whole different idea of considering watch design.
Right.
Because we're used to always thinking about the dial, right? And in this case, they were thinking about the whole thing as a sculptural element. And then when you think about that, it's really cool. It's like a much longer sentence, I guess.
Yeah. And then we move, I guess, into a later generation of the King Midas, which is the more symmetrical case. Both of these in white gold, like you said, one with a lapis lazuli dial and one with a Pavé dial, which is so out of character for you. I love
I'm actually really into diamond dials.
Now?
Hugely into diamond dials.
But I think that goes back to what you were just saying, that like how you could think something is horrible and tasteless 1 minute, and then, you know, your taste change as you kind of evolve and you open your mind up to exploring different options, different things. You know I've certainly gone through that with collecting cycles, and not just watches, with cars, with my dabbling in art. You know, I think as people, as humans, we're always like evolving, changing, growing. You know, trying to explore new things, and I think your expression is clearly shown in your watch collecting for sure. Which one do you like more?
Well, the diamond one. Here's why, man. Here's why. Because if you look at this thing, there is such an amazing contrast between this super brutal, very austere case, and then you've got this kind of extravaganza situation happening on the dial. And I'm really into the diamond dial thing. I would actually love to make a diamond dial for our watch.
Keep the secrets.
Yeah,
keep the secrets.
I mean, I'm just obsessed with it. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anyone will buy it, but I really like that.
All right, dealer's choice. Where are we going next?
Why don't we, since we're in the 70s, why don't we continue on to the 70s Patek stuff?
For sure. Well, before we get there, and we have just an honorable mention from the Cellini Midas kind of crossover line, jumbo size with another factory diamond dial. Beautiful example.
Funnily enough, for a long time I kind of disregarded Cellini, but there are actually islands of incredible genius in a kind of sea of shit of Cellini.
It's wild.
Like it's either incredible or like awful. It's binary. It's totally binary.
Well, it's kind of like you're collecting over the years. It's either been incredible or totally shit.
It's true. It's true.
All right, so walk us through your Pateks. You've always had such different, like, kind of awesome, exceptional taste in your vintage Patek. I don't think I've ever seen you with a Nautilus, with an Aquanaut, you know, or even just any basic Calatrava. It's always had to be something a little off the beaten path.
I mean, I did actually have a basic Calatrava for about 10 minutes. I bought it off my friend Mark Cho, and we did like an exchange of watches, and then after a while I was like, I don't really like it. Do you want? And he was like, I'll buy it back. Okay. But, well, the Pateks were what got me into the 70s, I think, initially, before the Midas.
Okay.
I don't know, man. It was another one of those situations of looking at those watches, and I think that when you collect watches, your mind adapts to a particular kind of aesthetic. And when you see a radically different aesthetic, it takes a while for you to kind of rewire your brain.
Right.
So I kept looking at them, and suddenly, again, it was one of those overnight things. I was like, oh my God, the design of the bracelets, the craft, the quality, the craftsmanship, the shapes, they're so interesting. And they're kind of, well, in the context of Pateks, super cheap.
Yeah, I mean,
super rare.
I understand
these things are so rare.
Yeah,
they hardly made any of these, right? And they were like whatever, like 16 grand.
Right.
And also, you should put it on, man, because you know that's 28 mil.
Well, no, I think a lot of people are scared by integrated bracelets because they're worried about having the bracelet cut, or they're worried about it being too short and how do they adjust it and this and that and the other. But a lot of people are coming around. All right, we're not going to do this now. It's a little tight on me. That's why.
Right.
Yeah, it's stunning. I just bought a yellow gold similar Patek, but not with the same case style, with a lapis style that we ordered an archive for, and it's just such a cool watch.
They're amazing
because Patek did not do a lot of stone dial like this. You know, not like Piaget. So you have a Polo over here. We'll get to Rolex. A lot of other brands that leaned into the stone dials. Patek did not.
Also, I think that for me, at least, the 70s was sort of really the last era of Patek being really interesting and audacious. I mean, there are watches they made in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s that are cool, but these are audacious ideas.
They've always been very conservative in the way they approach watchmaking, and it's always been a very traditional mindset. And I think you're right, the 70s and 80s were the only time where they truly deviated to try to keep up with other brands and the culture at the time. You have a Beta 21 here where they made this giant integrated bracelet quartz watch that's nothing like they've ever done before. The size was massive.
Well, because the bloody movement in there, it's like a steam engine. I mean, there's a geezer in there like shoveling coal into a furnace. It's massive, and it's ridiculous what's in there.
Yeah, absolutely crazy watch. And so I guess this one is similar in the same vein with an onyx style.
Yeah, different case shape.
Yeah.
And then this one, this is the only watch I bought twice. Patek actually made a whole series of watches just for the Japanese market.
Okay.
So this is one of them. I call it the Patek Pebble. I mean, why not? It's the only steel backwinder they made. They made about 400 of these, of which 100 or so are blue dial. Right. And it's just, again, it's this really beautiful thing. I mean, I probably would like to change this geezery strap. Really, I think, beautiful shape, very unusual, super organic, nothing like, they've never made anything really like this since. That's when you're supposed to roll off 6 references they made like this. Actually, Phil.
I'll spare you.
Actually, Phil.
No, but you're not wrong. You're not wrong. It's very unique of a design for them, especially for the era, using a backwind that late in their watchmaking kind of history.
And again, 15 grand.
Right.
I mean, for a watch of which there's 100 or so in existence with a blue dial, to me that seems crazy. Why wouldn't people collect this thing?
Well, it's just you kind of look at comparatively what's around that price range or more expensive, and what are you getting, versus something like this that is very difficult to find.
Right.
No one else will have it on their wrist. I think before all of that, when you break it down to what really drives you is the fact that you like it. And you see it and you're like, wow, I need that, I love that, and I think that's what's important.
It's one of those Venn diagram things. I look at okay, it's super rare, Japanese market, really obscure, so that's interesting. And then, of course, I have to like it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it's not hugely expensive.
Right. Okay, so let's move down here to the Piaget Polo, and you just pulled out another funky Piaget that I don't think I even knew existed.
Diamond dial.
I think we're going to get there. Let's start with the Polo. They've had so much attention recently because Piaget, a few months back, announced that they're going to relaunch the model with a much larger
38
millimeter yellow
95, is it 85, 95 grand?
I thought it was 70 plus.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, over $80,000 all in for this watch. That, it's kind of interesting because I never thought of the Polo as being this great staple of the Piaget watch world collection. But now all of a sudden there's all this attention to it. You have a very rare one here in white gold, the quote unquote jumbo size, because it's a 34 millimeter, also produced in quartz. They were all quartz, no automatics.
They made actually a few automatics.
Did they?
Yeah. There's a few very rare automatics.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
So, what drew you to the Polo? Is it the hype? Be honest. Is it because I know this is a more recent pickup for you.
Well, what's ironic is I've been looking for a white gold one for a while.
Right.
And then I was at the Miami Watch Fair.
Okay.
And what's that guy's name? Casso?
Yes, Fabrizio Casso.
Yeah. He's walking by, and I know him vaguely. And I was sitting at a table, just having a cup of tea or something. And he walks by and I go, "Hey, do you have a white gold Polo 34 mil?" I literally just shouted at him.
You just randomly thought
and he goes,
he might have one?
And he goes, "Yes, I do." He goes, "I just got one in and I haven't posted it on the website."
That is dumb luck.
I mean, it was crazy.
Right.
And so I was like, "Okay, I'll have it." And then I paid for it, and then when I finally got it, the day I got it was the day Polo announced that they were relaunching the Polo. It was totally crazy.
I'll say this, I never like to give them too much credit, but Roy and Sasha Davidoff were pushing me for months before the announcement because I guess they had some insider baseball that they were going to be revitalizing the Polo to buy up all these vintage Polos. I'm like, no, what? It's a Piaget Polo. Why?
Right.
And they were right. The market has since moved, and there is a lot of.
I mean, I got to say, man, I do love the The design of it's really beautiful. I personally think 38 is way too big.
I agree,
The
that's a perfect
34
size.
is just a genius size.
Because especially on an integrated bracelet, it already is going to wear bigger.
Exactly.
Because of that, you know, the way the lugs, stick out, the bracelet sticks out as it rounds, your wrist. Tell us about this
one,
guy. What is this?
So as far as I know, this is a pièce unique. Early 70s, because the case shape.
Piece of shit or a piece unique?
Sorry. Both.
Continue.
Simultaneously. It's like Schrodinger's cat. It exists. So there's both a piece unique and a piece of shit. No, I was the only bidder, which will shock you, at auction. I put in one bid, and then I was like, oh, I think it's kind of amazing. Like, it's unworn. I actually had an extension made by my jeweler, so this bit here.
Quick side note, because a lot of people are worried about getting these kind of watches because if the bracelet's too short, they can't wear it, or how do they cut it? What was the process like getting that extension? Was it difficult? Like, tell people so they're not so nervous.
I mean, look, you have to have a really good jeweler, and the mandate for the directive for the jeweler was just make an extension, but don't harm the bracelet in any way. Don't, like, drill into it, whatever. So he created this kind of, it just attaches the clip.
And you can remove it at the end.
Yeah, you can remove it. It's really simple. I mean, and cutting bracelets, I know people don't really want to do it, and if it's a little loose, I'm okay with it. I've done it before, quite a few times. It's very simple, and it's not very expensive.
Right.
And that's kind of, look, in the 70s, that's what people did. They cut them, they extended them. It wasn't a big deal. It's just how you wore these watches.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, this one, I don't know, man. It's an amazing shape. You know, it's beautiful, I think.
So you were just drawn to it simply because of the aesthetic.
Yeah, I just thought it was
very much like 80s Miami Vice, or like Studio 54.
It's totally Studio 54, man. I love it, man. I mean, it's just, how cool is that?
I think it's very cool. I'm joking with you that it's a piece of shit, obviously, but it's a very unique watch that you have to, there's no other way about it. You have to be into the aesthetic to like, to buy a watch.
I will say I'm not a massive Piaget fan generally. I know they're having a huge moment, and I'm really glad they are having a huge moment, because it's so nice to see the landscape open up beyond, like, the Submariner and the Daytona. But I've always just preferred, like, 70s Patek. There's a kind of refined thing to 70s Patek, a refined aesthetic that I think 70s Piaget does not have. They're a little bit more Vegas in a way.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes total sense. So I'm actually putting my watch back on my wrist.
That's right.
That coincidentally, you have two very similar watches.
Right.
One of the exact same, just in a different case metal, and one without the minute repeater complication, just a perpetual calendar. But we are talking about the octagonal, or did I pronounce that right? Octagonal era? Yeah, GERALD GENTA, which they are now bringing back with LVMH buying the brand, and they're going to be launching a bunch of new watches with this case style. This is when GERALD GENTA was already designing watches for himself, and he was not, creating the Royal Oak, the Nautilus, etc.
Right.
And these watches are the definition of what you were saying earlier. At one point, I thought they were god ugly.
Yeah, same.
And
I looked at them. There was a guy I was following, Andre on Instagram, he's a young guy.
He got. This is the second one I've ever had. The first one he got for me.
Yeah,
this watch. The 3019.
Yeah, he's amazing. Like, he had Roths and Genta way before other people.
Yep.
He's all sorts of, and I remember I'd always look at them on Instagram and go, God, that is so ugly. And then suddenly I was like, holy shit, I must have one. Again.
He flew into Miami from somewhere in Asia.
Singapore
to like pick up the watch, and because there was a trade involved. Really sweet guy, sweet guy, and he still has that watch. Somebody even asked me like, "Oh, you got it back?" I'm like, "No, that collector still has his, like, for sure." So yeah, and having this watch, skeleton, perpetual, minute repeater, like everything rolled into one.
Right.
Platinum. As I was just gonna say, yours isn't platinum. I don't think I've ever seen another platinum one. And then the same thing, we just kind of toned down a little bit with only the perpetual calendar in yellow gold. These are just like peak weird vibe case design from the era, 80s, 90s. Well,
this stuff is, I think, 90s.
Yeah.
Look, as an artist, here's what I would say about when you look at Genta's.
Are you an artist?
I don't know if you're aware, but I don't know if you're aware. But for me, when I look at Genta in the 90s, what I see and the 80s is I see a guy who I feel like in my mind the story is he had like a notebook full of ideas. It was always pitching to clients from like 1960 to 1985.
Right.
It was like, what about this? What about this? And they all said, no, that's too crazy.
Yeah.
And so finally, when he does his own thing, it's this explosion of materials, design, like everything he'd ever thought of. suddenly is happening.
It's what he wanted to do for himself. That
That's
other
right.
brands, probably gave him the axe on and said, "No, you're crazy."
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not
exactly. That in my mind, that's the story.
Yeah.
So earlier this year, and then towards the end of last year, I had this kind of reorientation. It's funny, like sometimes in collecting, you realize that even though you like these things, they're not for you anymore.
Right.
So I sold all the dive watches. I had this interesting collection of quartz watches from the 80s. I sold those, and I bought 90s and kind of early 80s stuff. So I got the Daniel Roths, I got the Genta, I got the Frank Muller, the IWC split, and the Cartier Pasha.
The
favorite,
the jailbird watch.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Let's segue to another brand before we get into this bad boy real quick, because we only have a few watches left.
Right.
Of another brand that LVMH has since bought and revitalized, or bought the rights to, and they're actually working with the original watchmaker who's still alive to revitalize the brand. I think so far what we've seen so far has been fantastic, but that would be Daniel Roth. And I know you've been pestering me over the last, I would say, year or so, like, any Roths, but I only want the early ones. So what drew you into the Daniel Roth mania? Was it just a kind of saw where the tide was turning? With
No. You know, well, here's the thing.
Case design.
In a weird way, it's connected to the Rolex pre-Daytona aesthetic. I've really always loved like kind of weirdly busy dials. Mm-hmm. But what's interesting, what I love about these is this collision between super classical formal brigade design and then this totally unique K-shape. That collision to me is really interesting and really, really beautiful. I mean, I would love to have more of those things because I think they're amazing.
Yeah, and I've always been an admirer of how the way they finish these guilloche dials are always absolutely stunning. And I applaud you with being willing to buy number 44 on the back, as you know that no Asian collector will ever buy it.
I bought it from an Asian collector. I'm sure he was just delighted to get rid of it.
Like, oh God,
he's like,
get rid
finally.
of this bad luck watch.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, these are super examples. Jump Hour is a personal favorite. I think it's always I think they executed the Jump Hour way better.
Even though weirdly, like it's kind of hard to tell the time.
Yeah, but you're not wearing this.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah.
Moving on from your incredible collection, which I can already tell that was clearly large inspiration for what is on your wrist. Obviously, a very special watch. Please tell us all about this.
Regale us
with the story of this.
So, 70s watches. About 3.5 years ago, I became friends with this. This sounds a bit weird. I became friends with a guy on the internet, and we started talking about watches. Alfred in Hong Kong, who I've never actually met, and now everyone thinks...
But he does exist, right?
Now everyone thinks Alfred is a chat GTP person, but he's actually a real person. So we just started talking about watches, and then we started talking about what we'd like to design, and I really felt like I guess I just wanted to make something that was kind of beautiful and sculptural.
Did you start talking to him because you knew he was like a watch?
No, I had no clue. Because he had actually bought some Viva Bastardo stuff.
Okay, cool.
And then we started talking about, and then it turned out he was a watch designer, and then we just had this conversation. And we kind of started designing a watch without any idea that we were going to make a watch.
Okay.
We're like, what would we, let's make this thing. And then we kind of end up making this thing. And look, now we sort of look like geniuses because the watch landscape is very different. But 3.5, 4 years ago, it was not really Midas, it wasn't really Piaget, it was still kind of a lot of other stuff. So we were sort of a little crazy in a way to be thinking that we would make this thing. But we've made this thing, and the response has been really, really incredible. And
look, even Audemars Piguet copied you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they saw we came out with it, and 2 weeks later they just sped up production, came out with their own watch.
Remaster, a very niche watch that no one ever knew existed except for you.
I love that watch. I mean, I've been trying to find one of those watches for years. I didn't know they only made 8. So we came out with this thing, and it's been a really, really incredible experience. I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of overwhelmed by the whole thing.
Yeah, no, you've had tremendous success in your first run. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So, how difficult was it to start from A to Z, designing this watch, manufacturing it, getting the right amount of eyeballs and publicity on it, to kind of, it's a true expression of you. And when you look at that, if you know you, which I do, it's clear as day. I heard you say the word before, brutalism, and I've seen the, kind of, I guess, PR material where you took it from
the window of a Marcel Breuer building uptown.
Right.
That was the main inspiration behind it. I mean, look, the design process was actually incredibly enjoyable, and the design process of anything is always really enjoyable because that's the idea part, and the idea part is always the most exciting. But then after that, then kind of like the release and sending stuff out and shipping and setting up a business and customer service, like all this stuff that I don't really know much about, to be honest, and nor does Alfred. So we're so new at it, and it's been amazing. We have all sorts of plans. The business aspect of things is a huge
learning curve.
Yeah, it's when I start talking about it, I kind of seize up, like I stop thinking altogether.
Like, let's worry about this tomorrow.
Yeah, that's right. So what about picking some new dials?
So tomorrow you have a piece unique going to Sotheby's for charity, which is fantastic.
Yep.
What are plans for the next launch? Plans for the future of the company? Anything you could disclose to us?
I mean, we've got like 4 or 5 ideas of things we want to do. I guess we had initially thought, okay, it'll take us I don't know how long we thought it would take us to sell the initial run of watches, and we thought we'd have a little bit more breathing time,
right.
But 45 minutes, so we've got now another 6 months of breathing time before we can make something new.
Yeah, the reception has been crazy. Even when you had Mike Nouveau, who would set off 10 figuring, oh, maybe we might need some help selling them, and he sold them in 30 seconds.
I mean, Mike never believed in it.
Yeah.
Was always at me.
Well, he didn't buy one of the first
ones.
No,
he didn't buy anything.
Not a good friend. I did.
Look,
I did.
You're a real friend.
Real friend.
Just so you guys know, Mike is standing behind the camera.
Delete this.
So, So, any interesting different cases, different dials? What can you tell us?
Well, look, really, the whole thing about this watch for us is it's an exploration of form and material. So we have all these ideas about materials, dials. We really want to push what we can do. Crystals, hands, like what we can make all that stuff out of.
Right.
And in a way, Genta is a real inspiration in terms of how curious he was in the 90s. So that kind of motivates us. I mean, that's all I can say at the moment, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, listen, I think this is going to be an interesting development for you and growth as a company, and as this was a hobby and a project that turned into something beautiful,
Thank you, Tony Robbins.
I mean, no, it's true. Congrats on
No,
your
I appreciate
success.
that, man.
Whenever I see somebody who has a vision that is able to execute on it, and the reception has been so warm and great, I'm proud of you, man. That's great. It's very difficult to do. I can't imagine creating my own watch from scratch. I wouldn't even want to.
It's just
such a daunting prospect.
It is daunting, man. But I really, this is what I feel about when you get to make something. It's a gift, right? And when you have that gift, I really believe it's your obligation and responsibility to try and make something new.
Right.
And so with this watch, yes, there are ideas, there are vestiges, there are memories and echoes of things that have come before, but hopefully this is its own thing. And that was really, really important to me and Alfred, is to make something that was hopefully a little bit new.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sitting down with us.
Thanks so much for coming, man.
Congrats on all your success.
Thank you.
I look forward to seeing what's next for the Toledano Chan brand.
Thank you.
I always look forward to seing what your next purchase is going to be, because it's always
so
going to be something interesting. I could laugh and then be like, maybe he was right.
Years later.
Maybe he was on to something there. No, but congrats on everything.
Thanks, man.
Fantastic.
I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks, man.
I hope you guys enjoyed watching that as much as we did making it. Thanks so much again to Phil Toledano for sitting down with us, and congrats to him and the Toledano Chan brand for their amazing success. The next day we headed to Sotheby's auction to see a piece unique that they had created for charity fall under the hammer. It smashed against an estimate of $6,000 to $12,000, eventually selling for $24,000, double the estimate. Congratulations to Phil and Alfred. Amazing job. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.